After visiting Lagavulin and Ardbeg, our third stop on Islay, on my 8th day in Scotland was Laphroaig Distillery. Laphroaig Distillery is named for the area of land at the head of Loch Laphroaig on the south coast of the Isle of Islay. The name Laphroaig literally means the beautiful hollow by the bay. The Laphroaig Distillery was established in 1815 by Donald and Alexander Johnston. The buildings were originally part of a farm, and after becoming a distillery, Laphroaig's whiskey soon gained popularity on the island, so they expanded in the 1820s. These original buildings are still in use today, and the malting floor is one of the few still in use within the industry and one of the finest preserved examples. One of the most important elements of Laphroaig's whiskey is the water source from the Kilbride stream. It serves as a coolant throughout the whiskey making process as well as a key flavor ingredient. It is soft, peated, and non-mineralized. Laphroaig Distillery hand cuts their own peat from their own Glen Marchie peat bog, which has a unique Islay terroir with a particular mix of heather, lichen, and moss. It is made up of a much higher ratio of sphagnum, or peat moss, that provide the whiskey its peaty, smoky, iodine-like medicinal profile. They then dry the peat out for 3 months. Laphroaig steeps are located at the top of the malting house. Here barley is soaked or steeped for 2 days in water sourced from the Kilbride reservoir. Once adequately soaked, the water is drained off, at which time it is referred to as green malt, which is then transported down to the malting floors. Laphroaig's malting floors are capable of holding up to 7 tons of barley. It is here where the barley begins germinating in order to convert the starch into sugar, keeping the windows open so as to regulate the temperature. The grain germinates at a relatively cool temperature of 15 to 16 degrees Celsius, and it has to be turned daily 7 days per week until it begins to sprout and the starch is turned to sugar. According to Laphroaig's foundation stone, the peat kilns were built in 1840, making them almost as old as the distillery itself. It is here that they burn the peat in order to imbue the barley with the distillery's signature smoky medicinal flavor. Unlike the other distilleries, Laphroaig peats before they dry. In a process lasting around 17 hours, the smoke or peat reek rises up through the perforated drying floor into the kiln. Here, the vaporized oils, the peat's phenolic compounds, and other wood-based smoky flavors are absorbed by the damp barley. They burn the peat at a relatively low temperature, a cold smoking process, that is responsible for the tarry note typical of Laphroaig. Once done, the barley is dried using hot air recycled from the stillhouse. The peated barley is then milled or ground to a grist of husk and flour, which Laphroaig then mashes in their stainless steel mash tun using hot water. Beginning at 67 degrees Celsius, the increasingly hot water dissolves the sugar. Once done, the clear sugary water, or wort, is siphoned off to the washbacks, where the magic of turning the sugar into alcohol takes place. The sugar is then converted into alcohol in stainless steel washbacks. Distiller's yeast is then added into 10,500 liters of wort. The yeast lives aerobically off the liquid's oxygen, and its population grows rapidly. Once it has used up the oxygen, the yeast then survives anaerobically off the sugar. At this stage, its main byproduct is alcohol, which it produces until it is killed off by the high temperatures. The fermentation lasts a minimum of 55 hours, enough time not only to convert a lot of sugar into alcohol, but also it develops lots of flavors, compounds, or congeners, many of which are responsible for Laphroaig's fruity notes. Once the fermentation is complete, the wort has become a distiller's beer or wash with an alcohol volume of around 8.5%, and it is ready to be distilled. Laphroaig Distillery has 7 stills, 3 larger wash stills, and 4 smaller spirit stills. Like all Scottish pot stills, they are made of copper, which has the effect of stripping the spirit of unwanted, largely sulfuric flavor compounds. Laphroaig double distills, a first distillation in the wash still and then a second in their spirit still. The first distillation produces a spirit or low wines with an alcohol content of 22%. From the second distillation, they only keep the middle part or cut of the spirit run and discard the head and the tail, which are poisonous and foul tasting. However, they make the first cut after 45 minutes, the latest first cut in the industry, and they make the second cut once the spirit's alcohol content has dropped to 60%, which is also quite late. This has an enormous effect on the taste of the spirit or new make, making it less sweet while at the same time preserving its more tarry and medicinal peaty notes. The alcohol of the new make is reduced to 63.5%, then pumped into an oak cask and then laid down in one of the warehouses, where it will be left to mature until deemed ready. Being right on the coast, the whiskey in warehouses takes on the influences of the Atlantic Ocean as a minute amount of salty air seeps through the cask and into the whiskey. The distillery loses between 2 and 4% of the cask's liquid, commonly referred to as the angel's share. Meanwhile, expelled air is continually replaced by oxygen, which reacts with the wood and the wood's chemical compounds to form new flavors. Nearly all of the whiskey is either wholly or partially matured in ex-American white oak cask sourced from Maker's Mark Distillery in Kentucky. These barrels impart caramel-like sweetness, as well as notes of vanilla, red fruits, light spices, and occasionally even tobacco and leather. The casks are disassembled in Kentucky, shipped over to Islay, and then coopered on site to make slightly larger casks called hogsheads, which are then laid down in the dunnage warehouses, where they are left to mature under lock and key. Laphroaig also uses ex-sherry casks, often to double or triple mature whiskey that has already spent time in ex-bourbon casks. Being made of European oak, ex-sherry casks have the effect of making the whiskey a little drier and spicier to taste, and full of notes of orange, dried black fruit, cinnamon, and clove. Once fully matured, and unless destined to be a single cask whiskey, the whiskey is mixed or vatted with other casks containing the same expression, and then bottled and labeled. After touring the distillery, we tasted 3 samples of Laphroaig whiskies. The first 2 were a Laphroaig Carchas 15 and a Laphroaig Carchas Friends of Laphroaig. By the way, I've heard that pronounced 2 different ways. I've heard Ralphie say Cardas, and I've heard the master distiller refer it as Carchas, so I'm going with Carchas. And then we had a sample from a 1998 sherry cask, number 70039, bottled at 55.3% alcohol by volume. I wasn't a big fan of either of the Carchasses, which is a Scottish Gaelic term meaning friendship, but I really liked the 1998, but unfortunately they were not selling it, so I didn't bring home any bottles from Laphroaig. Alrighty, well, I hope you've been paying attention to the last 3 videos, because now we're going to have a little quiz on Lagavulin Distillery, Ardbeg Distillery, and Laphroaig Distillery. And after that quiz, I'm going to do a side-by-side with 3 whiskeys, the Lagavulin 16, the Ardbeg 10, and the Laphroaig 10. If I had a Lagavulin 10, if there was such a thing, I'd do 3 10s, but I don't have one, so I'll do the Lagavulin 16, the most popular Lagavulin, up against the 2 most popular Ardbeg and Laphroaig. All right, here's the quiz. Question 1. Which 2 distilleries were founded in 1815? A. Lagavulin and Laphroaig, B. Ardbeg and Laphroaig, or C. Lagavulin and Ardbeg? And the answer is B. Ardbeg and Laphroaig were both founded in the year 1815. Question 2. In what year was Lagavulin founded? A. 1816, B. 1826, C. 1836, or D. 1846? And the answer is A. Lagavulin was founded in the year 1816. Question 3. Which distillery sources their water from the Kilbride Reservoir? A. Lagavulin, B. Ardbeg, C. Laphroaig, or D. All of the above? And the answer is C. Laphroaig sources their water from the Kilbride Reservoir. Question 4. Which distillery was founded by John Johnston and Archibald Campbell? A. Lagavulin, B. Ardbeg, or C. Laphroaig? And the answer is A. Lagavulin. Question 5. Which distillery name is an Anglicization of a Scottish Gaelic term meaning the small promontory? A. Lagavulin, B. Ardbeg, or C. Laphroaig? And the answer is B. Ardbeg. The name Ardbeg means the small promontory. If you don't know what a promontory is, it's that little hill that sort of juts out into the ocean. Question 6. Which distiller uses a Robert Bobby malt mill to grind their malt into grist? A. Lagavulin, B. Ardbeg, or C. Laphroaig? And the answer is B. Ardbeg uses a rare Robert Bobby malt mill to grind their malt into grist. Question 7. Which distillery is owned by LVMH? A. Lagavulin, B. Ardbeg, or C. Laphroaig? And the answer is B. Ardbeg is owned by LVMH, which also owns Glenmorangie, by the way. Question 8. What is sphagnum? A. A rare bottling produced by Laphroaig, B. A residue from producing wort that is fed to cows, C. A type of moss that is found in Isla peat, or D. A 1,500-liter bottle of whiskey? And the answer is C. A type of moss that is found in Isla peat. This is what gives the whiskey its iodine character, by the way. Did you notice that I misspelled Laphroaig in the first answer? If you caught that, you get an extra point. Question 9. Which distillery peats their barley before they dry it? In other words, they peat a wet barley and then later they air dry it. A. Lagavulin, B. Ardbeg, or C. Laphroaig? And the answer is C. Laphroaig. So whereas most distilleries are peating their barley through the drying process, Laphroaig actually peats it before they dry it. Question 10. Which distillery name means the beautiful hollow by the bay? A. Lagavulin, B. Ardbeg, or C. Laphroaig? And the answer is C. Laphroaig means the beautiful hollow by the bay. All right, I hope you did well on the quiz. It's more for a reinforcement of what we've already studied and learned. But let me know how you did down below. Now let's do a nosing and tasting of the Laphroaig, Lagavulin, and Ardbeg. The Laphroaig 10 and the Lagavulin 16 are both at 43% alcohol by volume. The Ardbeg 10 is at 46% alcohol by volume. Visually, they're really different. If you look at the Ardbeg 10, it's a lot lighter in color. The Laphroaig is a little bit darker, but the Lagavulin is a lot darker than that. So if I was doing these blind, just visually I'd be able to tell them apart. On the nose, so obviously is the peat and the smoke, something they have in common, and yet there are a lot of very distinctive differences. The Laphroaig is, I'd say on the nose, a little ashier, a little more iodine, a little more seaweed, a little more, smells a little bit more like the ocean. The Ardbeg smells sweeter, a little bit more candy-esque, and yet the Lagavulin, a little bit more chocolatey, it smells richer. The Ardbeg has a little bit more of a salty, meaty character to it. So the Ardbeg, I describe it as a little bit more, it's more like, almost like a little bit like smoked ham character to it. And definitely the Lagavulin is a lot more chocolatey. Now, all those descriptors, I'm not covering the full spectrum of everything that these whiskeys are displaying. Just what is it that really makes them stand out from all the rest of them? The question I have is, in studying these whiskeys and studying these producers, is there something distinctive about the whiskeys so that when smelled and tasted blind, you would say, this seems very Ardbeg in character. This seems very Lagavulin in character. This seems very Laphroaig in character. And I think some of the descriptors that I just gave you are some of the distinctives of these producers that sort of make them stand out. Not that one is any better than the other. You may have your personal preference as to what you like, but they do make them sort of different from one another, and yet similar terroir, similar climate, a lot of similarities and some minor differences in their production, but just really reinforces to me how these are just three great distillers that have uniqueness, not only in terms of their whiskeys, but the tour and the visiting the distilleries is very unique as well. All right, let's go for it on the palate. Start with, I'm going to start with the lightest in color, start with the Ardbeg 10. Now the challenge of this is, once you get something peat in your mouth, it really hangs in there. Have you ever seen Scotch test dummies, Scott and Bart do these peat shootouts, and they're in a whole bunch of them? Quite a challenge to be able to do one right after the other, but we'll give it a go. I'm going to try the Lagavulin next. Very similar on the palate as to what I was getting on the nose in terms of what is distinctive from all the others. And now the Laphroaig. Wow. The most intense smoke and peat and iodine and the medicinal character, without a doubt, is the Laphroaig. The sweetest, and I don't mean necessarily residual sugar or anything like that, just the most fruity and sweet-like is, I think, definitely the Lagavulin. And the most savory is probably the Ardbeg 10. All three of these are absolutely fantastic. All of these I would give 90 points plus. Really like them all. And which one I would prefer on any given day would probably depend on the mood I'm in, the weather, and everything else. I like all three of them. However, at this particular moment, right now, I gotta hang my hat on the Lagavulin 16. Really loving these, but I'm a big Ardbeg fan and love Laphroaig. These are absolutely fantastic. Alrighty, I hope you've enjoyed these videos thus far. We're not done because I have a bunch more just from Islay to go. I visited 20 distilleries total while traveling around Scotland, and we've just covered thus far the southern part of Islay. Now we're gonna head north, and we're gonna go to Bruichladdich, Kilhoman, Bunnahabhain, and Coila. The only one I didn't visit that was currently open was Bowmore. However, I did get a look at the distillery and walked around it early in the morning, our last day there. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you're enjoying my sharing of my trip through Scotland. And if you haven't already, if you haven't subscribed, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe. Give it a thumbs up. If you want to know when I post a new video or when I go live, typically go live on Sundays and Wednesdays. Ring the bell and you'll get a notification. All right, until next time, cheers. If you have benefited from my wine or whiskey studies and you wish to support this ongoing work, I ask that you become a Patreon supporter. The link to my Patreon account is in the description box below.